as much as she and I both love culture, and we do, it wasn't actually essentially about culture. It was about the opportunity to reposition Bradford in the eyes of the country and beyond. I went to a school in Edinburgh called James Gillespie's. It had been all girls. I was the first year of comprehensive co-ed. Girls were very much expected to do and be everything. And most of the teachers were female. I don't know if people will remember Muriel Spark and the Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. There's a line in that which is, "My girls are the creme de la creme." Gillespie's girls are in all walks of society doing all kinds of things. And I would have to recognise the contribution that made also to making me who I am. I often in my time in York thought, gosh, if I had half the energy, dynamism, entrepreneurialism and appetite that Bradford has, this place, York, would be like absolutely storming the north in terms of what it could contribute. I missed that. I also missed the diversity of Bradford. I missed the kind of different perspectives, the different relationships, the possibilities that creates. You rang me yesterday morning. I've seen your thing about Elon Musk. You rang me saying, "Mum, the world is going to shit. It's going to the hard right. What my kids are having to grow up in a world which is, you know." He'd been listening to Radio 4 yesterday morning. I felt very depressed.
There's a lot of normal people out there. I think we'll be all right.
Well. Well, interesting. We'll talk about my family and you'll realise why I'm not quite as complacent. But
well, that's a great... Shall we start? Well,
sorry, you two can join in. I'd love it. Because you've got views about Bradford as well.
Got microphones, though.
No, I know, but it's better as a four-way discussion.
Well, thank you.
The outsider, the one who's grown up here.
Absolutely. Well, grown up as well. But you obviously haven't grown up in Bradford, but you've made Bradford your home.
I have.
So tell us about the origin of Kersten England. Where did you start?
Well, where did I start? Well, I am, a Scottish lass, and I always will be Scottish in my heart, like many people in Bradford. They started out somewhere else and made a journey to this place to make a great life. No, I was born in Edinburgh, and in fact, at some point in my life in Edinburgh, I lived on Scotland Street.
Oh, wow.
And I always tell people this because it makes them laugh. And my first boyfriend was called Matthew Haggis, right? And he was English. So I'm Scottish and my surname's England, but blame my dad for that, really. So I was born into a family. In fact, we lived just outside in a small village. Next door to a man called Willie Gillis, who actually is one of Scotland's foremost painters and artists.
Wow.
And who's now long dead, of course, but you see all his paintings around galleries in Scotland. And so I used to play in his painting studio when he had all these painted stones. That's how he knew his colours. And he also used to brew homebrew and got me drunk on elderberry wine or elderflower wine when I was about 3. My parents came. I was quite a free-range child living in a village. But anyway, got 2 little sisters, so I'm the eldest of 3 girls. Seemed like they were coming every other year, is my memory. And then we moved into Edinburgh when I was about 5. My parents, however, separated when I was about 7, and that was a pretty defining moment, I would say, in my life. I loved both of them, as children do. The truth is, my dad was a brilliant scientist, warm, generous man, but also an alcoholic and intemperate. And that affected my mother really badly, and us to some extent when he was intemperate. So, but
how did your dad go on from there then? Did it get worse?
In a way it got worse, but not worse. I mean, he ended up being the director of plant breeding station for the government. He was next to where Dolly the sheep was. He ran the Scottish Plant Breeding Research Institute. Took early retirement, went off to live in the Caribbean to run an institute, a banana institute in the Caribbean and the Windward. He was a big sailor.
Right.
And my stepmother, who was from Northern Ireland, was a bit of... My mum grew up in Northern Ireland as well, so there's a real Northern Ireland connection. They went and lived on a boat in St. Lucia for 8 years while he did that, and I think drank a lot of rum. So it did, in a sense, and they both had untimely deaths. And very sad, because both brilliant. My stepmother had a PhD in physics, and my dad a PhD in agriculture. Do you know what I mean? So they were both very, very bright and actually very warm and generous people, but actually, and big sailors. They sailed the Atlantic a number of times, and and brought lots of riches into my life as a result of that, but also had that kind of shadow side that became their downfall very sadly. My mum, however, In fact, I think she had her first book accepted for publication when I was 1. So she wrote it during the first year of my life. She'd been writing since she was about 9 or 10. She kind of like was almost like an only child. Her big sister was 11 years older, and her dad was a merchant seaman away. And her mum and her, my mum was an avid reader, was always at the library, started, I've got some of the books she wrote, which are sort of Enid Blyton-esque when she was a kid. Anyway, she had her first book accepted for publication in 1962, I think it was. And she had 63 books published in her life, and her last one was published when she was 83, which was about, it's called The Trouble on Cable Street for kids, which was about the kind of brown shirts and Mosley in the 30s, because her distant relatives ran a pub on Cable Street, so she had a lot of connection to that. But anyway.
Wow.
So she became a single parent really when I was about 7. We were pretty strapped for cash, but she was a teacher part-time, but wrote, and then she got her breakthrough in writing dramas for Scottish telly. And also her big breakthrough as a writer came in the early 70s when she wrote about the troubles in Northern Ireland for teenagers.
And that's quite a famous one. I remember you telling me about this, wasn't it? So what was that one?
So, well, it was a 5-part series she ended up writing. The first 2 are probably the ones most people know. One's called 12th Day of July, which is the traditional day for marching by Protestant communities in Northern Ireland to celebrate King Billy, which is a hugely controversial kind of piece of history in the north of Ireland. And the second one was called Across the Barricades. But they were essentially love stories about a Catholic boy and a Protestant girl who meet across the divide. They both grow up in comparable working class terraced houses, not far from each other, but divided by that kind of religious divide, sectarian divide, really, religious divide. And they became classics in a sense of teenage fiction. I think Across the Barricades particularly was published every year from 1972 through to into the 2000s and in 25 languages, and won all sorts of prizes, has had short films made about it and things like that. And I think it was really seminal for me in the sense that that was my first lesson around prejudice, bigotry, relationships between different communities, the humanity of people when they can reach across divides. I think that was incredibly important in shaping who I am. I think the other thing my mother did was write very well about teenage girls. Very strong role models, very prominent in the books, agents and actors in their lives. And that wasn't usual even at that time, I think. She was just before all the others that came along, like Anne Fine or J.K. Rowling, or all the, you know what I mean? There's a lot of people writing for children now.
So are you like the custodian of, you and your sister's custodian of those rights now? Are the books still public?
We are, funnily enough. We are now the beneficiaries of royalties that come in, and I'm now a member of the author licensing community. I can't remember what it's called. ALCS. It's like the trade union for writers. But and my mum benefited hugely when the government moved to ensure that writers were paid a small amount every time their book was borrowed from a library. So you do get money from borrowings, and I also get some. I mean, they've dwindled, obviously. When she died, there was a bit of a spike because obviously there were lots of obituaries and
interest in what she was
coverage
doing.
and interest, and of course the topics are pretty relevant.
I was going to say
she covered.
It's probably as relevant today as they were back then. Right?
All her books, in a sense, were about identity, belonging, journeys, displacement. So my stepfather, who she met when I was 11 or 12, he's a Latvian Canadian who was an architect, but a displaced person for 4 years during the Second World War because his country was overrun by Germans and Russians and Germans. It's one of the Baltic, because states have not had their sovereignty confidently for very much of their history, really. And his father was the city architect of Riga, which is the capital city. So he's had a pretty well-to-do start in life, followed by 4 years of constant movement and
this is
at times the scrabble for survival. And my mum wrote about that. She also wrote 3 or 4 books about that whole period in European history, really, of the displacement of peoples. Where do they belong? Yeah. And I would now call him my dad, really. But so he ended up in Canada just after the Second World War as a refugee on a sponsorship. A business person in Ontario, Hamilton, I think, Ontario, sponsored them as a family to come across. But like all immigrant families, I think all the kids had jobs almost from the off to try and make ends meet, rebuild their lives, you know, and build successful lives. He got a degree in architecture, then he came to Cambridge to do a PhD and met my mum in London through a Canadian journalist who was interviewing my mum, as these things happen.
Amazing.
But amazing, because I've learned so much from him as well. That also makes...
The influences on you are just amazing, Kirsten.
Well, I feel very blessed, even though there were times in my childhood that didn't feel particularly safe. But on the other hand, you know, and the reason I at times worry is, of course, he has lived through war in Europe. He has seen how easily one's security, the things one takes for granted, can be ripped apart, you know, and how geopolitics can really, you know, impact you personally, really.
Yeah, definitely.
And I know how depressing he finds, how worried he is. He knows he won't be with us much longer.
Yeah, it's a scary.
How worried he is for his
Yeah.
grandchildren, great grandchildren, because he sees things happening that are reminiscent of things that he experienced.
I think if anyone is having their eyes and ears close to what's going on right now, they need to take a sort of look in the mirror, because it's a scary time, isn't it?
Yeah. Sometimes I think in the UK we kind of take a lot of things for granted because we haven't had a land war on our borders.
Yeah,
we've been on the winning side of most conflicts.
Yeah.
We still have a bit of British exceptionalism about, you know.
Yeah, well, we've won before.
The kind of democracy we are, the kind of rights we take for granted. And I guess I do think there's a really strong foundation of that, and I don't think we should take it for granted. It needs constant tending, contributing to, taking responsibility for, really.
I was going to say, do you think that this like you say, this richness of background and all of these experiences that came into your life, is that what led you into a basically a public life service? Is what you gave 30 plus years to the public service. Is that born in that, do you think? Or?
Probably. I mean, probably. I think it's also true to say I grew up in Edinburgh, and I grew up in Scotland, and I'm not a Presbyterian, but you can't underestimate the influence of Presbyterianism in Scotland, which is a sort of, you should work really hard to prove you're a good person or else you're going to hell, right? And I think I have a bit of that drive.
Yeah.
I always think I'm a sort of, a step or two away from going to hell. Not that I really believe it, but I think emotionally somehow there is a sort of, unless I keep proving my worth, I haven't proved my worth. And when one has a responsibility to bring everything you can to the table to try and make a better world. And I don't mean that in a preachy sort of way. I just think, it's a driver in me. I also, just before we finish on early life and the arc, I went to a school in Edinburgh called James Gillespie's, which had been all girls, and I don't know if people will remember Muriel Spark and the Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. It's a piece of literature that is quite famous. But anyways, there's a line in that which is, "My girls are the creme de la creme," as in, and it was I went to a school where it had been all girls. I was the first year of comprehensive co-ed. Girls were very much expected to do and be everything. And most of the teachers were female. Yeah. And I think that has also had quite an influence on me. And Gillespie's girls are in all walks of society doing all kinds of things. Do you know what I mean? As a result. And I would I'd have to recognise the contribution that made also to making me who I am. Yeah. And also all the debates around identity and nationalism in Scotland. I grew up at a time when the debate about Scottish independence was really live. So all of those things are in the mix, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
And so when was it when you took your first senior leadership role then?
I guess the first senior leadership role was in the early 90s. I came via academia. I taught in higher education for a while. Did my PhD research in Zimbabwe just after independence. Worked in community development for 4 years in the early 80s as well. But my first kind of step into local government was in 1990 when I went to work for Kirklees. And in 1993, I came to Bradford first to head up the organisation and management development function for Bradford. So that, I suppose you could say, was a senior role because it was a whole organisation responsibility for a local authority that was at the time probably 24,000 strong. You know, it was a real high point of funding for local government. And probably from 1993 to 2022, I was in different senior roles. I mean, my step into being a chief exec was 2009. So
that was York, wasn't it?
That was York. Yeah. So I went to York from Calderdale. So I came to Bradford in 93. I went to work for government for a couple of years in 2005 and discovered I wasn't really a natural civil servant. I like being closer to the action. Should just say that. I then went to Calderdale, did some fab stuff in Calderdale, loved that, and then got the opportunity to be a chief exec for the City of York, which I did for 6 years.
So then you moved to Bradford as chief exec.
I did.
And what was it? What was in that job spec that appealed to you to think, I need to go to Bradford?
Oh, well, I mean, I suppose it's worth saying I loved my time as a chief exec in the City of York. I mean, York is just heaving an asset, and potential. Place of innovation, excellent higher education, incredibly well connected, great education system. And I loved some of the things that we did for that 6 years. But I did get to a point where two things were happening. One is I did feel after 6 years I could go round the cycle again, but it wouldn't be as challenging or interesting or fascinating. I also, York is a place that on occasion swings between wanting to be a world-class city and wanting to be a county market town, right? And it gets really caught on those debates. Does, and I understand that. And it's, that's what politics is about. It's about what the people want, who they vote in. But I'm an expansionist person, as in I want a place to be everything it can possibly be. And I don't, it's not, it'd be arrogant to impose that on a place if it doesn't want to be it. But I want to work in places that want to be everything they possibly can be. So I was looking, and I had got to a point in my career where I wasn't going to go just anywhere. I needed to go to a place that I felt deep connection to. And bizarrely, the opportunity came up to apply to be chief exec in Edinburgh or to be chief exec in Bradford. My mother was still alive at that point, and obviously my kids are all
I was about
pretty
to say,
much born in Bradford, right? Living in Bradford. I've been associated with Bradford pretty continuously since 1990, so it was a kind of like I was on the short list for both, and I ended up withdrawing from Edinburgh because I wanted to come back to Bradford because, some people would say that's mad, right? But actually, I often in my time in York thought, gosh, if I had half the energy, dynamism, entrepreneurialism and appetite that Bradford has, this place, York, would be like absolutely, storming the north in terms of what it could contribute. And I missed that. I also missed the diversity of Bradford. I find York to be struggling sometimes with the very small amount of diversity it had. And that I find, I missed it. I missed the kind of different perspectives, the different relationships, the possibilities that creates. And my kids also, of course, they wanted me to come back to Bradford as well.
And then, so when you moved here in 1990, basically, they went to school here.
So I only had my son, and he was born in Manchester, which is where I'd lived from 1979, apart from being in Africa. Anyway, and then I had my 2 daughters here, both home births in Fagley. Fagley Road. Not
Road.
Fagley Road. Yeah. Well, Undercliff, Fagley Road. So I've got, I started out in BD3 and I worked my way down the valley to the postcodes BD3, BD9, BD18, BD20,
amazing.
But anyway.
You've done better than me. I'm still in the same BD postcode since I was 10.
Well,
anyway.
We lived in BD3 for quite a long time. So I do, I can put the place together. I can see how it all fits together. But so my kids all went to school in Bradford, primary and secondary, although, of course, and your colleagues will remember it was junior and middle at the time.
I had first school middle, The
first school middle, exactly. And I was a chair of a school governors through all that. That was hard. I think it was the right shift, but it was really disruptive to kids' education.
That's right,
Handling it well was a real challenge, and all the teachers as well, their morale through that time. Anyway, so the kids, they've all lived abroad. They've all worked away. They've all come back to Bradford because they are really proud Bradfordians. And I actually think their kind of sphere of comfort with difference, right? Different places, different kinds of people is so much greater for having grown up in this place. They're proud advocates for Bradford.
I'd agree with that. I think I grew up I was born in Wibsey. Moved over because I was being naughty, so I was moved.
I can't imagine you being naughty.
That's a story for another time.
Such a good boy.
Tell my mum and dad. So I was moved school when I was positively moved school for new opportunities when I was about 8 or 9,
right?
And I came to Thackley.
Oh, okay.
But I think going to Hanson School, which is massively diverse, meeting kids that are best friends now in life, that their parents came over from Pakistan, and they're here, they're working. It's mad. So the whole
they feel really aggrieved when Bradford is portrayed in the way it is, because it's not the Bradford they've experienced, and they've had opportunities, experiences, a richness of growing up. Now I get that not everybody has a great life in Bradford, don't get me wrong. I've looked at all the stats and I've experienced, and I can see the awful conditions some kids grow up in, but it is also possible to make the best of life
100%. 100%. So when you became chief exec, you saw the opportunity with what you were talking about, with the people, and that opportunity to really grow a diverse population and where that city could go. Coming to the end of your tenure, do you think you addressed those opportunities in the way that you really wanted to? Were you restricted at all? And how have you seen, and I'll give you my reflection first because I don't really think it's an unfair question. I think what you've done is you've created this foundation level now that's unreal. So all the infrastructure opportunity and raising the profile with City of Culture, which we'll talk about in a bit. But you coming into that, obviously there was a lot of empty buildings. There was probably low point in funding, and what do you feel you accomplished in that time frame?
What I'd say is it was the best and worst of times, if you see what I mean. So you cannot overlook the fact that we'd been through years of recession, huge reductions in council budgets. We then had to work through a pandemic,
Textile.
then cost of living. So there were a lot of headwinds against, right? But it was also the best of times in that I think, and I have to pay tribute to the political leadership of the council, it was a moment of stability and ambition for the place. That was also asset-based. I think, not to speak ill of my predecessor, who worked very hard to do the right things for Bradford, but I think often the narrative was about deficit and begging bowls to tackle our problems, rather than positioning the asset that is Bradford. I mean, and quite straightforwardly, I've always believed you can't have a successful north of England without a successful Bradford. How can you have the 5th biggest conurbation, right, which is full of young people with talent, who are globally connected, digital natives from entrepreneurial families? How can you not want to have that in play in the nation's prosperity? And that's a much, and I think it has proved to be a much more attractive narrative about a place than a narrative which is about poverty, decline, post-industrial stagnation, and so on. And I'm not saying those things aren't there, but the way to fix them is actually to bring people towards the potential of the place, which I fundamentally believed in, the energy and the talent of the people, the communities and the businesses of the district. And Bradford had been pretty poor at taking its place in the mind of investors, whether they be government, civil servants, or ministers, or businesses, business investors. Do you see what I mean?
Why do you think that was, though? Why do you think?
So I think you can't underestimate the hit we took after the riots in 2001. It was the biggest self-inflicted wound. I mean, I was living in Manningham at the time. En route to Salt Township, but I lived just off Oak Lane. I saw it happen. I was responsible for effectively riot recovery around community relations afterwards. And it diminished our self-esteem, our confidence. We were constantly reading about, this being a place of awful community relations, followed up by kind of some of the serious criminal activity, some of the child sexual exploitation, all those things which, let's face it, have happened in other big cities in this country, other big post-industrial cities. But for whatever reason, Bradford's sense of self, pride, civic pride, took an absolute dive bomb. And I think it's also it started to become more apparent that Leeds was pulling away. Yeah. I don't mean it's not a competition, but Leeds was finding a way to reconstruct its economy and maximise its sectoral advantages after the collapse of some of the industries. And of course, the other thing is Bradford's economy had been too dependent on textiles and engineering, and not enough thought had gone into how do we build a different type of economy. And alongside that, I think there'd been at times a poverty of ambition for our kids. Right now, I don't know how it was for you, but I remember going to a middle school meeting for my son, and they said, "Well, what can we say about Russell? Well, he hasn't caused any trouble," and that was about all they knew about my son. And I'm not, teachers work very hard, and they continue to work very hard. And I think we've made a real step change. But I think there was a time when the education system was wired to produce people who could work in the factory system, right? Yeah. So I think all of those things combined.
Russell was probably, because Russell's similar age to me, isn't he? About 40.
He's just about to turn 40.
Yeah, I've given him a year there. I'm over 40 now. But I mean, going on the riots piece, I remember at school, kids coming in saying that their mums and dads stopped them going out. Yeah. Because they wanted to see what was going on. It was interest. It was like, my friends are out there, I want to see it. Yeah. But it was a really bad time.
It was a really bad time. And the young men that got involved, many of them didn't know what they were getting into. Many of them were looking for thrill, excitement, something that, and I'm not defending any of it, and obviously I worked with lots of the families whose children and young people, not children, but young adults were in prison. I mean, that was extraordinary, that moment.
So one for another time, my neighbour was one of the police officers at first on the scene, and so some of you can see him, I was like, I won't ask you anymore, because clearly it was a very stressful experience. Hugely. But the investment piece is interesting, because we met through, you appointed me.
I did.
You're still my favourite person because of that.
Come on.
And I felt a calling with that, as you know, and I told you that from day one. Yeah. So for the benefit of anyone listening, that's chairing the Inwood Investment Partnership for the city, which I'm very proud to do. But it's interesting, over the past 2 years I've done that now, just going into the third year, that I've had the opportunity to see inside council life and the mechanics of that, but also more of the business community, a lot more, because my background was building a business in Leeds City Centre. Yeah. So just what you were saying about Leeds, I remember how bad it was in 2008 there, but driving in literally yesterday, and I remarked in my own mind with this place is just growing all the time. I mean, the buildings and
the cranes are in the sky.
Which is
that's why it's an indicator. It is I'm saying an indicator.
So where from an entrepreneurial community, because there is massive wealth in Bradford, there is some huge successful businesses, some of which are going to appear on this. What do you think they should be doing?
Well, I mean, here's my kind of wish list, if you like. And many of them do it. First and foremost, of course, they've got to make money, and I want them to employ people and employ people well in good jobs, and good jobs that have career progression about them, and I really like businesses to engage with our further education colleges and skills providers. So there's a real, appetite for development and growth in the businesses. But that, because of course, that's the most important thing really that a business can do. And I think, we've always said the best way to a long, happy life is to be in good work or have sufficient income, right, throughout your life. Yeah. Whether you change jobs and so on, that's fine. But as long as you are not scrabbling in the margin of poverty, you're likely to be healthier, happier, and not need the state involved in your life unnecessarily. Do you know? So that's first and foremost is, focus on the day job and employ people, as many people as you can, be interested in their skills and their progression. But I would also really like, I always do this when I know products are from Bradford, I look at the back to see whether it says the address of the company is in Bradford, right? Because for me, that's an indication. I'd really like the Bradford district businesses to associate with brand Bradford. And I think that's part of the challenge for your group that you chair, is for people to feel proud that this is where they are, this is where their roots are, these are the people that they are working with, and even if you're serving markets far and wide and international, which of course I hope people are, right? That's really important.
Yeah, totally.
But I want them to feel this is a good place to be. So associate with brand Bradford. Be an advocate and an ambassador for the city, when you're working with your investors, talk about why doing business in this city is good, because you've got access to the right skilled labour. We're creating the right transport networks and infrastructure for people to get access to goods, to distribute goods and services. That there is a local authority that is growth minded. I'd love to hear businesses recognise that it is a council, I believe, that sees good growth as the central thing it can support that will achieve better prosperity for everybody in the district. That's, that's absolutely where we want to be. Be alongside and part of, and challenge the local authority when you see what appears to be arbitrary or perverse decisions. But, to my knowledge, it's a council that's really pro-growth, is trying also to think very deliberately about the kind of growth there's going to be, the pivot to green growth, the energy infrastructure, the road infrastructure, massive things happening that will give us an opportunity to grow a greener economy. Because even if you wanted to, you can't avoid the necessity to pivot your business to consume less, right?
It's happening. We've got to do something.
More. We've got to do something. And then, it's a bit like the last industrial, the end of the industrial revolution, the collapse of textiles and engineering. We can't be caught out again. And we've got some natural advantages with what we're doing around hydrogen, the combined heat and power network that we're putting in, the air quality work that's happened, even if it was challenging.
Well, there's already an impact.
It's been implemented. But look, fewer kids are going to A&E with asthma, and older people have less chronic respiratory problems. That has got to be good for businesses as well.
I was at Bradford University before Christmas. They took me around, because you remember Ellie, weren't you, from the university?
Oh yeah.
She's moved back to Glasgow now. She was great. She introduced me to Shirley. And I met the team down there before Christmas, and I had a full tour of everything. It was amazing. And I saw the digital twin that they've built for the city. And actually how, if citizens could see that, where this is the picture before, this is the colour, it's bright red, and now with the clean air zone, this is the impact and the colour diminishing.
It's incredible.
It's incredible.
Isn't it incredible? So, deploying the best new technologies to actually enable us to plan and see what is happening in our
It's fantastic, isn't it?
I mean, if you combine that with the Born in Bradford kind of heft, which is that kind of world's largest longitudinal study of childhood development, they are tracking what is happening for that cohort of kids because of the air quality work, right? That's so also showing...
We've got data.
We've got data. It proves the case. And, for me, it is an example of where a local authority can be at its best, as in that was a hugely controversial, difficult decision to take. Many would have balked at it. We worked really hard to engage with and take communities and businesses with us. We secured as much money from government as possible. We tried to make the transition smooth, but it's still disruptive change. But that's at the heart of the responsibility of government, isn't it?
Totally.
For elected officials to have the courage to take decisions which will disrupt people's lives, but in the belief and backed up by evidence that it will make it the long term, right? And more disruptive change is going to come to all of us. I mean, just look at this country. There are places that might be unviable because of constant flooding in the near term. Right? It's not like it's going to be 10, 15 years. It's happening now.
It's happening now. And I'm glad we live on a big hill.
Well, me too. Exactly. I live on a big hill. You're a bit down. Anyway,
you're higher than me.
I'm higher. I'm 300 metres up, right? So that's...
You'll be all right.
Lots of stuff comes off the moor.
I'll sail over to you. The big thing we've not talked about yet is City of Culture.
Yeah.
And you played a very important role in that, bringing it to Bradford. What do you think the opportunity is there from your perspective? Why did you go, we've got to go for that?
Yeah. Well, I think the opportunity is huge, but I don't think it's the silver bullet unless it's combined with all the other moves we're making around placemaking, setting the stage for business growth, the green economy, and so on. Do you know what I mean? It's got to be seen alongside all of the other things you're doing, including your work on place marketing. But the reason that the council decided to go for it, and the leader of the council, absolutely committed to doing so, was as much as she and I both love culture, and we do, it wasn't actually essentially about culture. It was about the opportunity to reposition Bradford in the eyes of the country and beyond, right? It was an opportunity to build business confidence for growth, to bring visitors to Bradford to see what Bradford's all about, to have skills provision attached to what we were doing that would actually bring longer term contribution. So, we are projecting GVA uplift of over 300 million, projecting visitor uplift of about 5 million. We're projecting business job creation. And for me, it's a sort of part of the reset of what Bradford is and its contribution to the national economy, yes, but also the ability to create opportunity, optimism, ambition and opportunities for all the people of this district, as well as having a phenomenal year of culture, and we will.
How optimistic, when you put that submission in, how optimistic were you that we'd get it?
I was involved in the early 2000s with the bid for Bradford to be capital of culture. Liverpool secured the title at that time. We've seen the journey that Liverpool have been on. Before that, Glasgow, right? When I grew up as an Edinburgh girl, and this is typical really of the kind of like disdain Edinburgh people sometimes have for Glasgow. We thought Glasgow was a place you went to get stabbed on a Saturday night on Sauchiehall Street. Now I happen to think it's one of the most culturally vibrant places in the UK. And you have to say their journey as capital culture as well, and everything that came after, and Liverpool. I know they had some advantages like the Beatles, for example, but nonetheless, I have seen the transformational contribution of having a designation such as that. And when I came back to Bradford, there was an early opportunity to bid for something called the Great Exhibition of the North, 2016-17 I think this was, which we didn't secure. We bid and we were in the final four or whatever, and Newcastle, Gateshead, I think, It wasn't hugely successful, actually, as it happens, for them. I'm sure they did some great stuff, but I don't think it was that successful. However, in bidding, Bradford we learned a lot about what it would take to be successful. We had a lot of ambition, great ideas, but we hadn't put the right infrastructure in place in terms of places and spaces. We didn't have the right community of creatives working together as we had, and we didn't have the full calendar of events that you'd need to be really credible. So we were definitely up there, but I realised we had work to do. So from 2017 onwards, the council was reinvesting in venue spaces, in something called the Cultural Voice Forum, which brings creatives together, in re-establishing an events calendar, that was credible, of the Bradford Festival, a food and drink festival, supporting the literature festival. And we also got initial down payment of, I think it was 4 million from government for Bradford Live. Right, so we were doing work on St George's. We'd just done City Hall. We were doing some of the parks. You see what I mean? There's a lot going on, and we were thinking much more intentionally about what would it take to have the right infrastructure in place to be really credible. So when the opportunity came up, and obviously Hull was City of Culture in 2017, I think, we also took a real interest in what was going on there, and we built a bid with everybody in the district, communities, businesses. I do believe that was really authentically of Bradford, bringing all our assets to the table, but with a really credible underpinning, if you like, right? Because we now had the venues, the spaces, the network of creative individuals, the events that we could build from,
And who was the running in the competition at that time? Who were you up against?
We were up against Southampton. We're up against Durham, up against, I think, Derbyshire. I'm trying to remember now. Up against Wrexham. Did I say Wrexham?
No.
Which
Wrexham.
was really interesting because, of course, you know Ryan Rent,
you know
the whole story, right? So they were, and they've been in touch to want to kind of learn from us and think about rebidding. I think Stirling.
Right.
I'm trying to remember. There were originally there were about 25 places expressing interest, and we went down to 6, and then I think at the end there were 4 of us.
Right.
So that would be Southampton, Durham, Wrexham, and us.
And
we were there in Coventry.
Did you have any indication when? Because it's a big moment, isn't it? As chief exec and your colleagues in the council, was it literally the envelopes there? Open it, see if we've won. Or
we absolutely didn't know. No, I was because I was in Coventry. I wasn't in City Park. I really missed out on being in City Park because that was one of the moments, I think, for people in the district. If you look at the kind of photos, the images from that moment, it's phenomenal. I was sitting on a kind of pub bench in the rain in Coventry with Nadine Dorris making the announcement. And I'm not great at these things, so I was like steeling myself for us not winning, and I was already calibrating about how do you rebuild from this and how do you not lose the benefits we've had and sustain the confidence and ambition of people. So, and I was, and then just before she opened the envelope, the cameras swung round to our pub bench, and I thought, oh, hang on, we might be in here. So I genuinely was completely, both blown away and delighted. Obviously.
So a massive career highlight for you, that.
Oh, yeah. Well, it made a lot of sense of 20-something years of work and care for Bradford, you know, and everybody had worked so hard on it. It wasn't really about me at all. But it was, for me, one of those moments you think, oh, yeah, something's coming good here, right? There'd been a number of others, like hopefully the railway.
Yes.
Would be, for me, is also a huge highlight. And
there's a lot around space as well, isn't there, at the minute? I don't know, I've been involved in a bit of that over the last couple of years, and I think there's a big move to...
I think for a long time Bradford went from project to project as though that was the be-all and end-all, and didn't have an overall strategic vision for how all the bits played their part. And I think you can now talk about the city and district and how it connects knits together, right? And what each part needs to be used for. Do you see what I mean? Particularly the Southern Gateway stuff and some of the city centre stuff and Canal Road. I was at a dinner sponsored by this law firm last year, and it was quite nice actually, because they invited me because of my Bradford job title, not because of business. So nice. I went in a chair of... I'm glad it has some
benefit. I was at dinner in Leeds. No. So... the guy I was sat next to, who's actually becoming a bit of a friend, we've got to share a lot of commonalities in interests, but he's one of the family members in the Timpson business.
Oh, yeah.
And they bought a manufacturing business in Keighley. And I was like, why? Why? I'm interested. And he was like, there's these skills that are just not like it anywhere else.
I agree. I mean, Keighley has its own distinctive economy. I used to tell this story about So something like 70% of automotives in the world have a part made within 3 miles of Keighley town
I love
centre.
that. Not heard that before.
It's a spring, a clip, it's a solar
Yeah.
panel, it's whatever,
Yeah.
right? I remember we went and got our camper van from somewhere down Huddersfield Way, and it was a converted thing. And he said, "Oh yeah, we got those from, I don't know if you know it, Keighley." And I went, "Oh yeah, come from there, right?" It's like, I said, "You just demonstrated the point, the selling point that I use." Ask people, because it is a really interesting. We are a supply chain economy. That is, we don't have a prime, which is sometimes seen as a disadvantage. But I think it actually possibly gives Bradford some flexibilities to move with markets.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
if you're supplying essential parts.
I completely agree with you, because a guy we're speaking to on this as well, who is coming up, remembers the colour television factory.
Oh yeah,
and when that closed,
Radio Rentals. What was it called?
What was it called before that?
It was.
It just became a bit. I wasn't around then.
Indeed, me neither. Just so you know, I am old, but not that old.
But Bob was, I think. So he was telling us how when that closed down, the engineers were looking for work. Some of them decided to set up on their own. Yeah. And the foundation of that was Filtronics, and then spinning out from that, the different
radio design.
Radio design. And that now is a basis of Bradford's district space industry, because a lot of the components, and we had a company over looking at, we had them here at the mill, looking at where they would put their regional headquarters, and I think the indication is going to be Bradford.
Oh,
that's a US business looking at.
Well, the set-top box was invented here.
We're in the building, aren't we?
We are in the building. I know. I've just remembered as well, it's Baird TV.
That's
Baird
it,
TV.
beginning with B, didn't it?
John Logie Baird. So I think we used to say the first television sets in the world were manufactured in the Bradford district, right? And that then became Radio Rentals. There's loads of
nice stories.
Those stories. I do believe in the power of narrative. I think to capture people's imagination be an attractor, as it were.
So City of Culture doesn't get any better, and you got some really great news on the infrastructure projects. I think there's some, and Bradford Live. What? You obviously reached a point in your own life where you were deciding to think, what am I going to do next? And what brought you to that? Do you think you'd done? Do you think you'd done your bit and you'd done enough, or did you want to see someone else take the next part of the journey, the baton, hand the baton over? What was the?
Well, I think I'd been a chief exec for 14 years in local government, through some of the very hardest times local government's experienced, I think. I was entering my mid-60s. My mother was poorly and died, and my father's not that well, and I have grandchildren. And I think 8 years, I did feel 8 years as chief exec anywhere, it is probably a good thing to have fresh perspectives and new blood, because after 8 years, you're at one level part of the furniture, and you stop seeing things in quite the sharpness that you might imagine. And also you have a certain approach which does still pay dividends, of course, but I think they might be diminishing, because people also understand, that's what you would say, that's what you would do. And I do think there's just a truth in that. So I think those two things came together for me, right? And I was also thinking about, look, I'm in my early 60s. I have got a lot of energy left, but I want to be well into my 70s and hopefully 80s. And beyond, and actually, maybe it's time for me to make a different choice and a shift, right? So those things, I think, came together. And I think that was right.
Was it easy?
No, it's not easy. I don't know if you can tell, but I still care deeply about this place and its people and communities.
Well, you're chairing City of Culture.
I am chairing City of Culture.
But I know you do lots of other things as well in the community.
I do.
Supporting interests. And how?
Well, I have 3 paid jobs, actually.
Oh, really? So you're still...
I'm co-directing a research project for York's universities on... social and economic well-being. Social, economic and environmental well-being. I'm also mentoring and coaching senior leaders in the public sector. And I also act as a representative for senior execs who are facing challenges in their role with their employer. So
I can see being really good at that.
Yeah. Well, it's a pretty isolated job, and you're in the eye of a storm a lot of the time with public opinion, and
You just made me smile, because I remember the first time I chaired the meeting for you when you appointed me, and I was chairing it, and I got really caught up in listening rather than chairing. I don't know if you remember this. And you were sat at the other end of City Hall in this big, lovely room, and I was taking it all in, and I was like, wow, I think I've made it. It's a beautiful hall in because we've got a beautiful City Hall, haven't we?
No, it's amazing, yeah.
You said you said something, and then you went, Pete, I think I might be chairing here. But you did it in such a way where I was like, that's the nod. I need to be paying attention now. So I can imagine you being really good helping people.
Well, it's also true that occasionally I am a bit over assiduous as a chair. I get into meetings now, and there's the kind of itching to, and it's a really bad habit. So
So what would you? So anyone looking at, and I was keen to ask you that, anyone looking at that kind of role, because we're hoping the type of people listening to that are going to listen to this. Obviously, there's a Bradford centric piece to the
of course
what we're doing, because it's part of the city culture piece. But if people broader around the country decide to listen to it in the types of jobs and roles, what would you say, what would your advice be if they were thinking of taking up a chief exec director role or starting a business? Because to me, we've joked about it before, haven't we? Where you once said, it must be stressful running your own business. And I was like, yeah, but it must be stressful running a massive organisation. So what advice would you give to people looking at that?
Well, I guess there's two bits of advice. One bit of advice is about the role, and the other bit is about the person and them staying in good shape, really. So, but let's start with the role. I think the kind of one of the unique things about being a local authority chief exec is, yes, you are running a big operation. It's like a medium-sized multinational company, isn't it, in terms of different.
Because Bradford, for example, your tenure that had how many 10,000 employees?
If you include school-based staff, it was nearer to 14,000, because some of the staff are still employed by local authority, but at arm's length, I suppose. And £400 million, well, a 1.4 billion turnover, 400 million net controllable budget. It's a big operation, right? And it comes with all those responsibilities, including for the health and safety of those employees and the safe delivery of services. So it's a huge thing. But actually, you're also a place and system leader. So if the root of local government's responsibility is enshrined in something called the Local Government Act 2000, which is the duty of care and well-being for the place in terms of its social, economic and environmental well-being right now and for the future. So it's actually, the challenge to local government is to do everything possible to create the highest level of well-being and prosperity for a place now, but not at the expense of the future.
Yeah, sure.
Not just to deliver services, right?
Yeah.
And to achieve that purpose, you have to work with all of the actors in the system, all the agencies, and that means the businesses, the other statutory agencies, the communities, to galvanise the talent, the asset, the resources and the ambitions, and make common cause to try and achieve things. Because local government in and of itself cannot do an awful lot about a lot of things. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Whether you're talking about educational attainment, which is a joint venture with parents and kids and schools, whether it's a criminal justice system and working with police and probation and prisons, whether it's about growth and regeneration, which it's all about partnership and it's all about thinking whole system. So for a chief exec, the real challenge is to understand how your operation and that it's operating effectively, but that it is not just an introspective kind of operation which is only interested in almost like steady state manufacturing. Do you know what I mean? It's not just making widgets time and time again. It's constantly attending to the needs of a place and what it will take.
And that just must take an enormous amount of emotional energy.
Well, I think all the chief execs I know in local government, the great ones, have phenomenal amounts of energy, because it is it like being a council leader. It's a different role, but you're never off.
Yeah.
And your antennae are always on.
Yeah.
And you are moving seamlessly from, flooding and moving people out into rescue centres to multi-million pound contracts with, you know,
a supply for the schools or whatever,
to pitching to government for. Do you see what I mean? And and you know, so you can be effectively mopping out the toilets, but also then kind of, you know, in Whitehall lobbying for your place. So you have to be able to operate at all levels. I think the other thing is, actually, in that sense, to really spend time listening. Listening to your communities, looking at the data, but listening to businesses, respecting the lived experience, the insights and expertise everybody can bring. Too often, people are in a judgmental place, assessing each other and what have you got to bring and are you up to it and all the rest of it, rather than trying to really respect what people can bring. You know, tending to operate through critique rather than working with. So those are, you know, but for the person, it's about not getting isolated, building your allies, delegating, investing in the capacity of your team. Because the other thing is, in the past, you've had hero chief execs who think they've got to do it all themselves or think they're the only ones who know. And there's a real, almost irresistible pull to that, and sometimes your staff also want you to be the one in front of the firing line and all the rest of it, right? I mean, it's not dissimilar in business, is it? You know, people delegate up all the time, you know, and failure demand comes to your door all the time. But investing the time in everybody in the organisation taking responsibility, being in their best shape, and fronting things as well, so that you can focus where you can really add value. So those are, you know, those are some of the things. But it's a huge privilege. It's one of the best jobs I think. But it's not for the faint-hearted.
So I'm really interested in. It's hard to get a perspective, I think, right now that's not really biased by one side or the other. And what I pick people up quite a lot in, say, the business setting. You know, the bloody council needs to do it, and it's like, actually, really? And where are those views coming from? But if you were to say you would start again, we're not going to pick on Bradford, because one of the things I think we need to make really clear is Bradford has some issues, it has opportunities, but that's not unlike any other industrial city. No. And certainly with the pressures around the world right now in different places, cities facing bigger problems than Bradford is. But if you were like a founder of a startup, for example, and we were going to look at a startup which is a local authority, how would you look at that? Like, how would we think about funding? What would we think about in terms of the services that really sit within local authority or should sit outside of that? I mean, do you have any views on what that might look like?
Well, the first thing I'd say is the primary aspect of local government, not to forget here, is it's a democratic institution, So I think you'd have, and it should be built with, by and for the people of the place, right? That is, you know, what makes us special. What gives local government legitimacy to make big decisions that are disruptive to people's lives. And I think we are really ripe in this country for a renewal of democracy. I think trust and confidence in politicians and in democratic practice has been in sharp and steep decline, not helped by, you know, movements elsewhere and the good, you know, and the worst aspects of the way our world is at the moment, you know. So the first thing I would say is you build an organisation that is with and for the people of the place, right? And that means thinking about participative democracy as well as representative. And I'm sorry if this is going into kind of
it's interesting.
But I mean, I'm chair of the Young Foundation, which is a national think tank which does a lot of thinking about this stuff. And I think that you'd have to have a process of organisation building which is deeply engaged with and the communities and businesses of the place, right? What do we want this place to be like? What do we want for our children? What do we want for our businesses? What are the big issues that we're facing? Which is, you build, you know, form follows function, doesn't it, Pete, right? So strategic purpose is what you need first to start with. Which is maybe slightly different than a startup company, which is like, is there a market for my product? You know, where is there an opening in the market for something that I would bring to it, right? This is more, can we create common cause here, right? And bring everybody to the table, right? And then you do need some kind of mechanisms for appointing people who will take responsibility for everybody to make some of the tough
without
decisions.
self-interest, right?
Yeah, and doing it without self-interest.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting this though, because if you look at what might have been seen as the heyday of municipalism in Bradford, it was self-interested because it was Titus Salt, it was Lister, it was all of the big business people. I mean, in the late 19th century, right? Yeah. The big businesses of Bradford were all also aldermen, councillors, mayors of the city. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
And they were building the infrastructure for their businesses to operate, which is why you got roads, sanitation, water supply, education system. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. And it was, enlightened, you might say. Look at, we're in Saltaire, model village, but it was also self-interested. So I'm not saying you can completely eliminate self-interest, but you need to be clear about it.
Yeah. Interesting.
And it needs to be a benefit to everybody. And of course, when, in the late 90s, not everybody had the vote, right? So this is a very different movement where we have universal suffrage and everybody has the chance to make their views known. But I'd love to see more people thinking of politics as something that they would be prepared to invest in, contribute to. And that's the democratic renewal piece. But that's got to be accompanied by that continuous listening to, engaging with and working alongside communities and businesses, which at our best, Bradford can do really well. Can do really well. And this is not just about Bradford. I think the funding basis of local government, there's a lot of debate about this at the moment because it's bust, basically, the model of funding. And what happened progressively from the early 2000s was we moved away from the concept of progressive redistribution on a national basis towards need to reliance on the local tax base, right? And I'm sorry to get into this. No, it's a bit complicated, but
I think people will be really interested.
In the mid 2000s, you'd say 66% of Bradford's money and everybody's money came from central government through business rate redistribution, and 33% from council tax. Well, as we sit here today, it's flipped. So it's now 66% council tax and 33% comes from central government. Right. So central government progressively stepped away from that progressive redistribution piece. Now, go figure. If you were a place with huge levels of poverty, right, and most of your housing is band A or B, as in the lowest tax base, you're generating less from your tax base, right? Yeah. And even 2 and 3% uplift on that doesn't give you what it would give you in the county shires or inner city London, right? Right. So that means that places which experience the greatest need, you only have to look at the graphs to tell you that in terms of adult social care, children, child protection, and so on, then, more and more of your budget is consumed by people who have statutory needs. You have to respond to them quite rightly, and you have less and less to do the regeneration and building of prosperity, which then would get you into the better tax.
It's survival mode, isn't it? You're staying in survival mode.
Do you see all you're doing, and I think, used to be 45% went on children's and adult social care. It's probably 80% now. Wow. Now that leaves you tiny margins to actually work on the things that build quality of life and prosperity. And then people can pay tax, right? So you get into a virtuous cycle. More people pay tax, housing stock is improved, they've got less needs because they're earning better, and you've got more money to do the important things.
What do you think, is a big question, but do you think the current government has the will to do something about it? I
think it's hard. They have in the revenue support grant statement for next year, they have made some shifts, and obviously there's now a lot of discontent from counties because they've slightly tilted in favour of the kind of big urban areas that have got depths of need. There are winners and losers whichever way you do it. And I do wonder whether it needs to be set against a sort of growth trajectory over time that starts to, that acknowledges right now, if we're going to reset and not to use a word that was gone out of fashion, but level up. What you need is a fiscal reset for a period of time that enables everywhere to achieve levels of growth that then starts to change the tax base kind of profile,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Now, I'm not politically restricted, but I still feel politically restricted. I hope it's a government that has the courage to make some of this disruptive change. It obviously has already made some decisions that are causing
causing
businesses,
some,
for example, and others.
Yeah.
You know, some of the decisions on national insurance, and so on, are not easy. So I hope it will. And I understand it needs to show people that their lives are going to get better quickly if it's going to have a chance at a longer term
work.
Longer term of work, exactly. So I understand the political environment sufficiently to know this is not easy stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think from my perspective, you look at what's happening over in America, and I mean that's just wild, isn't it?
It is wild, and also what I was really shocked by was government in America is pretty wild. I mean, actually, the states have quite a lot of control. I mean, obviously, we're hearing noises about California.
Yeah.
But I spent some time in North Carolina not so long ago and went to visit some city managers, which is what they call chief execs. And actually, I was really shocked to discover how underfunded local government is. They have very few, they have something like 6 elected officials for places, and a city manager working on slim budgets. And, I was reading in the local paper about the fire service raising money to replace the fire hoses because they didn't have enough funding from the tax base. And I don't think it's a model I would want to go down. I do believe the base level of local democracy and the infrastructure for a good life starts here. Doesn't start in national government or even regional government. It starts here.
And do you think that this is something which so it's interesting actually. A few months ago I was having lunch with some chief executives of multi-academy trusts. Which obviously oversee schools. And there was a CFO that was with us. They came over to the mill and we had lunch, and I was saying about, this is pre the election win, so I was saying, do you think the new government's going to help schools with budgets and capital budgets, especially around the buildings? And she just sort of put a knife and fork down, and she said, look, the thing about schools is it's not that we don't have the funding, it comes in unequally. So there's schools that have funding that's unreal, that they have £10 million on the balance sheet, that they can't spend it fast enough. Whereas a leafy suburb has, they're going to trade fair, and I picked this up from someone else. They go to trade fairs to pick up pens and pencils for the children to use, and they're in a really nice area. So do you think, just getting in the helicopter and going back up again, from a local authority perspective, the money is there? It's just that it's not accessed right. Going back to your percentages point.
Sure. I think, we are ripe for a review of all that. So there is, it's really hard, isn't it? Obviously, the Chancellor has changed some of the fiscal rules to enable some more investment. There are big decisions facing this government about military spend, defence spend, given the situation and noises that are being made about contributions to NATO and all the rest of it. The health service is like a kind of like constant sucking kind of, baby. There's never full.
No.
And local government has never had a protected budget. They have in government, they call protected budget lines and departmental expenditure limits. Protected DELs and non-protected, and local government isn't a protected one. DFE is more. I think there are choices this government needs to make, and there are more monies that could be made available, I think, particularly to move spend upstream into prevention. So for me, in terms of the NHS, and everybody's saying this, we have to think more seriously about prevention, keeping people healthy and moving money to social care than you actually, because otherwise you can't build enough hospitals or operating theatres to deal with the diabetes damage.
Yes.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So is that what we want? Do we want to end up amputating limbs all the time because of the levels of diabetes, or do we want to decisively shift stuff up so that our kids are getting access to good food, physical activity, not developing diabetes early in life? And I think, for me, that's as much the choice. Where do we put our monies? I would really put more money into the early years because I think that the Jesuits were right. Show me the boy at 7, the child at 7, I'll show you the man, the woman. Yeah. What happens between 0 and 7 is absolutely critical. And I think the York and Bradford stuff shows that as well. So are we getting those early years right? Are we getting kids ready, to learn, brimful of confidence, optimism about their future lives? You've sort of lost it by 7 if you haven't delivered it. Do you see?
I do, yeah.
So I think there's a lot of there are a lot of reasons to review expenditure and where we're putting the money, how the money is arriving, who's receiving it, what distribution formulas we're using. Absolutely. I don't think the problem has been that Treasury has not been convinced that funding prevention yields the benefits that we believe it would, and the evidence base. And what we are now, I think people are beginning to accept. Look at Sure Start, right? We now see the consequences for children that didn't benefit from having Sure Start provision. It takes a generation to appear, though. Right?
Yes.
Do you see what I mean?
I do,
So for a number of years, everyone went, oh, well, not really making that much difference. Now you can see the levels of readiness to learn, the child protection issues. And of course, it's complicated by pandemics and poverty and things like that. But nonetheless, the evidence is there now, right?
You need to look at it again. No. So if you had your time again, Kersten, as chief exec, and this could be applying to York or Bradford, because I know we have to be careful about singling one thing out or the other. But or maybe you want it to be about one thing. But what would you do differently, or what would you want to do differently?
I mean, there's lots of things that I now reflect on where I think I could have altered course, taken a different view. Clearly, there are times when I think I'm too dominant, I don't delegate enough. Times when I'm spending my time too much on detail, it should be strategy, all that stuff. But that I think most chief execs would reflect on. The biggest regret for me will always be that in the kind of 2016-17 period, I didn't fight hard enough to sustain the investment in preventative work for children. And I've got to say that because we had awful budget decisions. We were taking, 40, 50 million out of the budget that year. And we significantly reduced the amount that we could spend on community-based preventative work with children. And at the time, it felt like there was no option. And I think now, actually, should I have spent longer? Should I have looked harder? At the time, our children's services were seen to be doing well. We just had a sort of review that said, things were actually quite strong. But when you look now at all the challenges Bradford's had around children, I will never not regret that we didn't think more deeply about that decision, really. I think that's the thing that I would have done differently. There are things about my style, my behaviour,
It's usually about people, though, isn't it, regret? You usually think about...
There are also a couple of tough decisions I might have made about people that I didn't make quickly enough, right? Because we're human beings, aren't we? And there's an emotional cost to some of those difficult decisions. So I made loads of big and difficult decisions, and I took responsibility for them. But that, I go back to that and I think, and who knows whether it would have made a difference, right? But it's the thing I think, if I could have my time back, would have fought harder, looked more deeply, spent longer, we weren't the only authority that did that,
and I
right?
think,
That's the national picture was the money had gone from central government.
And you're lining that up against all the other things you've got to look after, right?
But ultimately you're accountable, and I am accountable, take responsibility for the things that we did. So that I think there were some key budget decisions that I would have taken longer on, looked differently at, proposed. That's the main thing, really. But hindsight is also a wonderful thing.
Do you think, this is... I need to frame this in my brain before I say it, but there's also a burden on the community itself, isn't there, to look after children?
Of course. No, of course.
You
I
know.
mean, you know.
And I'm not trying to help you with, jump over the table and
I mean,
with you, but
yeah. I mean, it takes a whole village to raise a child, right? It's everybody's responsibility. I do think there's too much expectation on a nuclear family to be able to do it all, because actually it does, you know, it's an African proverb, but it's true. It takes friends, neighbours, relatives safely being involved in children's lives to support. My kids are lucky. They have loads of other adults involved in their life from when they were little, who I trusted, who they felt safe with, who gave them different opportunities, different networks. Do you see what I mean? And experiences that I think they are the richer for.
Yes.
So it does take a whole community, but the local authority has a part to play, particularly for those kids who, through no fault of their own, and actually not even necessarily the fault of their parents, are not getting a great start in life for that reason. So, but, you know, and we did try and protect some of the community infrastructure, but you just have to look about, you know, everywhere, libraries, it's really hard to keep them running. It's a discretionary piece of activity. There's a lot of community libraries now. You know, we have kept quite a lot of the youth service going, and other places didn't. We've still got the neighbourhood services that we had. And actually meshing them all together more effectively would, I think, also be part of the solution. But you're right.
Thank you for
that.
Yeah.
It's tough to say that will forever be on my watch, something I think about.
Wow, we've gone through some pretty heavy stuff there, and thinking about you in retirement. Lol.
Yeah,
it's not in retirement.
It's not retirement. No, it's not.
You're just actively doing stuff. What does this year for you look like with 2025? What are you hoping to get out of this year for you professionally, not just in Bradford, but you know, yourself and your career? What are you hoping to do?
I mean, for 25, you know, in terms of the City of Culture year, the thing I mainly want is Bradford to have a brilliant year and everybody to be gobsmacked by, you know, the place that we are, the things that we do, the opportunities that we have. It's not really about me at all. On other fronts, I mean, it's a bit of closure for me, right, of something that I had long dreamed of achieving for our city and district. For me, professionally, you know, I am developing a kind of work which brings higher education and local authorities more closely together to look at applied research. So we have a lot of fantastic universities in Yorkshire, but that research often sits on a shelf, isn't applied, doesn't make a difference, that it could do. And getting the connections between local government and combined authorities and the policy development they do and academic research, that's part of I'm doing passion-led projects now, and that for me is another passion project, right? Which is making knowledge work effectively. And as I said, I'm directing a research programme and working with Yorkshire universities and connecting with the research councils to try and kind of drive more investment that's about place. I've got a number of roles, but I chair this think and do tank, which is all around community agency, social justice, which is about ensuring that in this phase of government, we are thinking about people, their lived experience, their agency, and how that can contribute to making the UK a kind of better place, more prosperous place, and also where people have good community relations, because good community relations has been an abiding passion for me. I'm also a commissioner for the National Preparedness Commission, which is advising the government on the resilience of the UK. And obviously there are people around that table who are, you know, from the ex-military or police or counter-terrorism, and then, you know, me. But I used to chair the West Yorkshire Resilience Forum, so I have brought agencies together, you know, like through the pandemic to work on responding to crisis. I'm particularly bringing that need to think about community resilience and a framework for supporting communities to be more resilient, to work together, the training, the skills, the coordination. You know, I'm really interested in what a digital platform for resilience might look like that communities could access. You know, so I'm working on that front. I'm also a trustee for the National Literacy Trust, which is a passion from my mum, because she was a writer and was a children's author, and I've seen what literacy, the riches literacy brings into your life, and too many people in this country haven't got good levels of literacy, and I think it's an important piece of work that we're doing. Doing things like libraries for primaries. We're working in prisons with people around their literacy levels, and working in community settings around particularly reading groups of fathers and kids, dads and reading groups and things like that. So those things are all...
You do it a lot.
I'm doing well, but because I've got a load of energy, and I'm still not trying to avoid going to hell, right? So and I would go mad if my brain wasn't engaged, and my heart, that's what I'm doing.
Oh, amazing. Well, I suspect we'll have you on again, because there's more to talk about. But thank you very much, Kersten. That's been wonderful. Thank you.
That's all right, Pete. It's been a pleasure to spend the time with you.
Yeah, thank you.